For those of you who don't know me, I'm Marisa Hughes. I'm the chair of the Wildlife Committee here. And before I introduce our illustrious speaker, who is also a member of the Wildlife Committee, I just want to tell you about a few of our upcoming programs and some of the things that we're working on right now. Last month, we were hoping to collab with newcomers and old friends, and unfortunately, the storm knocked out the power. The program that was going to be presented at that time was by the Fluvanna Master Gardeners on beneficial and harmful insects. We've just spoken with them. We were able to reschedule, and I'm pretty sure we haven't totally nailed it down, so just look for more information in GM Corner. But I'm pretty sure we're going with Sunday, June 17th, if I'm not correct. But look for information, and that program will be coming out. Another very exciting opportunity next weekend. You have to get up early for this one. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, I admit, but the Virginia Herpetological Society, they study snakes and reptiles. They're coming to Lake Monticello to do what's called a community assessment. And so you have to get up early for this one. We start at 8:30 here in Ashland. We're going to be in the lower rooms and get kind of a briefing. If we have enough people, we'll break into two groups. And basically, it'll just be going to the different beaches and public areas, kind of Bunker Park, any other common spaces, and trying to just take an assessment, see what different snakes and reptiles are in our community. A bonus of participating is that the report is actually published eventually. This is something that they do for different communities, and anybody who participates becomes a citizen scientist in there. So, and then the other things that, the Wildlife Committee, we're trying to bring you all not just programs, but some educational content. There's a wildlife tab under lmoa.org. We're trying to put some information there on soil and water conservation, things to do to improve water quality, other issues with the wildlife. In the fall, in September, we'll be presenting to the board on some of the data that we found on the deer herds here, as well as issues with the geese management that we've encountered so far. And another big project we're working on is we're working on a conservation stormwater runoff garden near Tufton Pond. I don't know if you all have been there lately, but they're doing, biodredging because of the algae blooms. And then the kind of that hill behind the shed is a little bit steep, and it has little to no vegetation on it. So what we're working to do is get a vendor who will then come in and plant native plants along there. And I'm sure that Beth will be talking about this. Native plants are the perfect kind of complement to the biodredging. They provide a natural filtration system for nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as provide erosion control, and also provide a habitat for wildlife and pollinators. So we're working on that. We hope to present the revised resolution proposal for that this month. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce here Beth Farmer. Again, we're very lucky to have her on the Wildlife Committee. Beth is retired from having a native plant nursery near Richmond, Virginia. And so she's here to share her knowledge on the use of native plants in landscaping and in wildlife gardening. She's going to answer the question that we all want to know is, are there any deer-resistant native plants? So, take it away, Beth.
Hi, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. I've had allergies and a cold, so hopefully I won't lose my voice talking. But anyway, today's program, we're going to start going over some tips for how to create wildlife habitats, and then reasons for creating a habitat. And then I've selected a group of plants that will be great for wildlife, also are great for landscaping, and I chose them from the rarely eaten to almost never eaten list, but I'm not sure that one goes good for Lake Monticello. But, so first we'll go over what is a native plant. A native plant is a plant that has occurred naturally in a specific region, ecosystem, or habitat for thousands of years without human introduction. Native insects and animals depend on these plants for survival. Invasive plants, I see many around here. Unfortunately, the deer don't eat the native plants. That's one reason why they do thrive so well, is because they have no natural enemies. But they're a serious threat to ecosystems and wildlife. They compete with natural species for sun, water, nutrients, and growing spaces, and they are responsible for 42% of the endangered and threatened species. All the plants that in the past we've been landscaping with, our mothers and grandmothers landscaped with them, those have come from other countries and are called exotics, and that's the majority of what you do find in the garden centers today. Thankfully, most garden centers do have a native section. There are many just privately owned native plant nurseries throughout Virginia now, where there didn't used to be years ago. But there is a list you can find on the Native Plant Society website that of a list of all the nurseries that do carry native plants. These are a few species I've seen around Lake Monticello. Unfortunately, there are many more. One of them is the Elaeagnus pungens. It's evergreen, has lots of berries, makes a good hedge plant. There's also the autumn olive. You see that up and down the highways. Now it's leafed out. It has real silvery foliage, but it's very abundant along the highways. I think VDOT used to use it for highway plants. Miscanthus sinensis, it's the grass I see everybody's used in their landscapes, but it is highly invasive. And I will give a couple other examples of native grasses that are good to use for landscapes later on. But the Mahonia beelii, I think, is the one, especially where we live, that has most invaded the woods. It's very invasive, and right now it has big blueberries, which are kind of attractive, but the birds do eat them, and they have been rampantly spread throughout our community. The plant I really enjoy talking about the most for invasives is the nandina. A lot of people just love this plant. It finally made the invasive species list in the last update in September 2024, but I always included it, and the reason being because of the berries. The berries that those garden club women love to do arrangements with, people love to decorate with them at Christmas, and through the winter they definitely make a great pop in the yard. But the berries contain cyanide, and they are very deadly to birds and to mammals. And if you have a winter like we did this past year, where you were covered in ice and snow for so long, those berries are going to be eaten. So if you have the nandina, I know people don't want to, but if you can just cut the berries off in the fall, and that will ensure that they don't get eaten through the winter time. There's been a major decline in birds and pollinators. Some of the reasons are habitat loss from urbanization, agriculture, industrial development, pollution. Extreme weather events finally has made the list because we definitely have more extreme weather than we used to. Use of chemicals. Americans use 1.1 billion pounds of pesticides annually in the United States, and birds, 2.5 billion are killed by our pet cats and the feral cats every year. So that's a lot of birds that are being killed. So if you're thinking of planting natives to attract the wildlife and to create a habitat, one, you want to keep your cats indoors, and then two, you want to just be careful of the pesticides and herbicides that you do use on your property. Not only is it going to harm the wildlife, being a lake community, those chemicals are ending up in our lake systems and cause a lot of problem. So what do you want to include in your habitat? You want food, you want plant species that are native to Virginia, you want a water source, either natural or man-made, and you want shelter and cover for nesting birds, bees, insects, and reptiles and other small mammals. You also want to consider planting a 4-season garden, so you have food throughout the season. You can plant trees, shrubs, grasses, and perennials, and if you put them in, think of vertical layers, your tall shade trees, your understory trees, your shrubs, and then your perennials and grasses. That will give all the wildlife a good chance for finding food. But you want flowers that are going to support the pollinators. You want plants that are going to have seeds, nuts, and berries. You want to create nesting habitats, and you want plants that are host plants, and again, you want that water source. You can, thankfully, our community has the lake, and we have many ponds, but if you can just have a bird bath that you keep cleaned out, or just a a water feature. These are all good for all kinds of wildlife. Mostly when we think of habitats, we think of those warm months when we're outdoors enjoying everything, and you see the butterflies, the bees are out. But all the wildlife really and insects need winter habitat. Stems and branches of trees and shrubs and wildflowers make great habitats. Insects burrow into like seed heads of flowers. The bees will actually lay eggs in some of the hollow stems of perennials, and all the stems of branches and trees also make really good habitats for little insects and beetles. Or have a lot that's not offensive to neighbors, and you can do a small brush pile in the back and just keep it neat. You can put your dead wood and other garden debris in there. And leaf litter I'll talk about on the next slide. And then rock piles. We have a lot of rocks throughout the community in the drainage areas, and then people line the beds with them. But if you could do little rock piles, either in your landscape, make it kind of ornamental, or just in the back of the property. But it would be great habitat for beetles, for reptiles and frogs and all kinds of different creatures. Okay, in the fall, a lot we hear the words, leave the leaves. The leaves are very important for wildlife. They also are great nutrients for your soil, but you do need to make them neat and tidy. You can't just let them blow into the neighbor's yard who's just spent a lot of money having their yard raked and cleaned up of leaves. You want to have them out of your drainage areas, and especially if you're closer to the lake, you don't want to wash it into the lake systems. But they provide natural mulch and slow release fertilizer for the soil. Spiders, snails, worms, beetles, frogs, and more will use the leaves for shelter and for food. And many butterflies and moths will overwinter as eggs, caterpillars, chrysalis, and adults. The top butterfly is a fritillary, and it will actually winter over in the leaves as an adult. And then the bottom is the woolly worm. We all see them in the fall scurrying around, but he will bury himself under the leaves for the winter time. Almost 70% of our native bees will tunnel and burrow underground through the winter, and the leaves are a great added layer of protection. And then all these insects and caterpillars and everything that are buried in there, it's great food for birds and other mammals, not just through the winter, but throughout the entire season. But the big key here is to manage your leaves. You can consider making islands around some groups of trees and make it look like a purpose, not that you just totally neglected your front yard. And you can, if you have wooded areas, you can just leave them in the wooded areas. And you can make a leaf pile near the rear of your property if it's not offensive to other people. But you can just maybe leave it low and long, and you won't hardly even see it, but it would make a great habitat. And then if you're going to mulch some of them, it's best to wait until springtime, and this gives all the wildlife a chance to emerge from the leaves. Host plants. You'll hear me talk about them a bit through the coming slides. Insects are the basis of the food chain, and insects will eat your plants. If they're not eating your plants, that means you don't have good natives and they're not good for wildlife. But the Lepidoptera is an order of insects that include butterflies and moths. And the butterflies and moths, most of them need specific plants to lay their eggs on. That's the only thing that the caterpillars can eat. And if you don't have those plants, they will either lay eggs on plants that they can't eat, or they will not lay eggs at all. And the more natives that you have, most of them will host some sort of caterpillar or moth. But the more different species you have, the more caterpillars you will bring into your yard. Okay, the birds. How many of you have bird feeders? A lot of you. So we all enjoy seeing the birds. I find bird feed expensive. It also attracts, the squirrels probably eat more than the birds, and if you run out of food, they're going to become aggressive and demand to have more bird feed out there. And then it also can attract bear and raccoons and other wildlife that you might not want into your yard. How many of you have hummingbird feeders? A lot of you too. You know, if I'm sure y'all all know, if you need to clean them every 2 to 3 days, and every day when it's hot weather. Otherwise, bacteria will build up and you'll kill the hummingbirds or make them very sick. But while the hummingbirds are attracted to the nectar that you give them, and they're attracted to nectar in the plants, the biggest source of their diet are actually tiny insects, and those are the insects that are going to be living on your native plants. Planting for the wildlife habitat, you're going to have those insects, you're going to have those caterpillars, and then once the flowers bloom and seed out, you have seed for tons of birds that you'll see come into your yard without having to buy the bird feed. And a lot of them will winter over. The seeds will hold over through the winter also. But in the springtime, the mama birds especially need those caterpillars and insects. Just a tiny little chickadee nest, the mama needs 570 caterpillars to feed them, and that's just per day. So that's a lot of caterpillars. I could talk plants all day. I probably have a plant problem, but you can ask my husband about that. But but I tried to pick some that were on the rarely eaten or very deer resistant. I found in Lake Monticello that really doesn't make a difference. But anyway, I've put in a few of the shade trees because of all our wonderful trees in this community that they protect. Most of us probably don't need to worry about planting shade trees too much because we have an abundance of them, and they're great for wildlife. So I've picked just a few of them to show you, and then we'll get on to some understory and shrubs and then some perennials. Virginia originally was mostly forested. We had some open savannas, grasslands, but the majority of Virginia was forested. So when you see Virginia native plants that say full sun, mostly they were in open woods and they just had like sun through the day, not like really hot full sun all day. So if you don't have full sun, which many of us do not, don't be hesitant to try in some sunny spots that do get a fair amount of sun, or to put some in between the trees that get like scattering of sun through the day. The first tree I'll talk about is the mighty oak tree. It hosts 500 plus different caterpillar species, and that's a lot of caterpillars throughout the springtime for the birds. It also has great cavities for nesting for mammals and birds, and then it produces all those wonderful acorns in the fall. Ilex opaca, the American holly. Virginia's on the short list for evergreens. We really don't have an enormous amount of evergreens, so if you can try and get some of into your landscape, they really are pretty and also beneficial. And once they're established, I don't think the deer are going to eat the holly leaves. When they're new and tender, they may. The holly, you do need male and female to get the berries. These berries are called spinach berries. They're not very tasty. That's nature's way of ensuring all the berries aren't going to be eaten up by like Christmas time, and they'll hold over through a long cold winter like we had this year. And then the holly trees also, with all the branching, make great nesting sites. The red maple, we have an abundance throughout the community. They're one of the earlier pollinating trees, so they're great for all those early pollinators, and then they produce early seeds. By springtime, most of the seeds from the summer and fall have been eaten up. So if you have some trees and plants that produced early seeds or berries, it's always a great thing because everybody's getting hungry by this time. And then they are host to 265 different caterpillar species, and one of them is the Crocopia silk moth. The river birch would do great in this community. It likes lower damp areas and sun to part shade, even probably some shade. It hosts to 413 different caterpillar species, one of them being the mourning cloak. And the woodpeckers like these because of all that loose bark. It has all kinds of insects in there, so it gets in there and really eats it. Okay, now I'll get to some understory and some shrubs. The Asimina triloba, the pawpaw, one of my favorite. It likes low damp areas like on the hillsides. In the early spring, they bloom all these tiny little burgundy brown flowers. They mimic rotten meat, and that draws the carrion flies and beetles, and that's what pollinates them. And they are host to the zebra swallowtail, and that's the beautiful butterfly and her caterpillar. And then in September, they have these wonderful big tropical fruits that taste kind of like banana custard. I know in Richmond along the James River, everybody goes into a pawpaw frenzy in the fall. So the Itea virginiana, Virginia sweetspire, blooms late April, May. Tons of beautiful blooms, great for all those early pollinators. And then in the fall, it has spectacular burgundy color. I think there's some of these at the golf course, and the deer don't seem to be eating them. But they like like moist stream banks, medium moist and periodic flooding. They can also do kind of medium moist, but we'll take full sun to full shade. And we'll tolerate our clay soils also. The straight species get 4 to 8 feet tall and wide. They will sucker. If this is too much for your front yard landscape, there are cultivars in the nurseries that are smaller and a little better behaved that are just also as attractive. Serviceberry, one of the earlier ones you'll see blooming in the woods, white wispy flowers on the edge of the woods, and then they have beautiful fall color. They also, this time of the year, they will produce abundance of berries that are edible for people as well as enjoyed by wildlife. You do need they're not male and female, you just need 2 to cross-pollinate to get the berries. And they are host to 124 different caterpillar species, and one of them is the red spotted purple. This is one of my favorite little shrubby trees, the spice bush. It also blooms out really early in the spring, has very fragrant leaves. The Indians use the leaves for tea. The deer should not eat them. They did eat mine. I have my backyard fenced in now. So far, everything's holding. But in the early spring, they bloom these tiny little beautiful yellow flowers. And then in September, you get red berries will ripen up. You do need male and female to get the berries on this one. And then in the fall, you get beautiful golden yellow foliage. But they like kind of low, wet areas, part shade to full shade. So it's one that we definitely could find spots in this community for those. But my favorite part is they are the host plant for the spicebush swallowtail. It looks similar to the black swallowtail, but the blue on the bottom is a little more aqua color, and it'll be smaller. And then this is her caterpillar. I think it's the cutest caterpillar that there is. Those are fake eyes. They use them like protection. They look like a tree snake. The arrowwood viburnum is a great landscape shrub. It can get 10 by 10 foot if it gets enough sun. Very changeable environment, prefers loamy soil, tolerates our clay, and it'll take kind of medium moist all the way to kind of a little bit on the drier side. But we'll take full sun to light shade. In the spring is loaded with beautiful flowers that'll be loaded with bees and small butterflies. And then in the fall, you get these wonderful berries. In the nursery trade, you'll see a lot of cultivars of these. If you want berries, you need 2 different cultivars because you need different genetics, back to the botany of the plants, but different genetics to get the plants. So just if you're buying some and you want those berries, just know that you do need 2 different varieties. And these are host to the clear-wing hummingbird moth, which is a cool moth. This is the one plant that the deer have not eaten on yet. The Ilex glabra, the inkberry holly, it's an evergreen. Straight species can get like 5 to 8 feet and suckers. Great for a screening plant. Will take full sun to part shade. It takes moist to poorly drained soils. If you got an area that just stays a little more consistently wet, this plant would do well. A lot of plants don't like consistently wet soils, but this one would hang in there. There are cultivars. I've used the gem box in two houses, and they have done well, but the gem box and the strong box only get 2 to 3 feet, and then the compacta and the shamrock get 4 to 5 feet. But these are good alternatives to boxwood and to like the English holly. But all the cultivars are male, so you will not get berries, and the straight species you do need male and female if you want to have the berries for wildlife. The wax myrtle, this has been one of my favorite plants since I lived in North Myrtle Beach for years ago, and we used to have tidal floods, hurricane floods. So you kind of look around and see what survives, and you try to plant that. And these were growing wild, and they managed to take the salt water, so I dug them up, put them down the side of the yard. I limbed them up like that second picture, makes it look kind of ornamental, and then you have pretty gardens you can plant underneath. Or if you just let them grow, they will sucker and make a nice hedge. These have the bayberry scent to the leaves and the berries. They used to make the bayberry candles from these. This plant is more coastal plant, but it does grow all the way up into Goochland, and so it really would do well here. This past winter, it was frostbite like all over everywhere, because if it gets frostbite, you'll have some dieback, but it won't kill the plant. And these also produce, you need male and female to get the berries. They produce bunches of berries, but these also are the spinach berries, and they will hold over actually through the winter into the next spring. Carolina allspice, the leaves and the flower have a wonderful fragrance. The deer shouldn't eat this, but anyway, they can get 6 to 12 feet tall and will sucker, so it needs to be in a place that you can just let it grow. I gave some to my sister, and she keeps trying to give me some back. but I grew it when we lived northwest of Richmond, and I couldn't. It just stayed in one place. So it just depends on your soil and the conditions. But it can take brief flooding all the way to medium moist. So if you've got an area that's in a drainage area, you just want something big and pretty. This is a great plant. It blooms, probably blooming about now. And it has beautiful little flowers, but they also have that burgundy brown look that will attract the carrion flies. And then in the fall, you have wonderful golden yellow foliage. All right, now for a few grasses. Grasses are very essential for habitats. The songbirds will nest in them, and they also will hold the seed over well through the winter until they're all eaten. Last house, we had acres of meadow, and the last winter we were there, I think every seed off of every piece of grass was eaten just because it was a really bad winter. These will hold the seed over until they're eaten. The little blue stem is drought tolerant. Most of the grasses are host to a lot of the skippers, but this can take full sun to some light shade. The native grasses put down roots up to 12 feet deep, so if you have a place that you want to hold the dirt, or just know that once they're established, there's not a whole lot that's going to kill them either. But the little blue stem, you can find some cultivars in the nursery. If it's a native nursery, you can probably find the straight species. It only gets 2 to 3 feet tall, so it would be a good grass to have in a landscape. It's not going to get big and floppy and look weedy. And then in the fall, it has beautiful yellow, orange, red foliage, so it's really attractive. Pink muley grass, I have 2 in the yard that were there when we moved there, and the deer have never touched it. They get 2 to 3 feet tall, dry, sandy, or rocky soil, and likes open woodland. So not all day hot sun, but it does not like wet feet. So this what you want to put higher up on your lot if you have some low wet areas. But in the fall, it's a stunning, stunning grass. The Panicum virgatum is one that I say definitely do not plant the straight species. They tend to get tall. In a meadow, the flowers and the grasses all kind of support one another, and this is one plant that definitely is going to flop if it's not supported. But there are some cultivars that you can readily find in the nurseries that usually are more rigid and are not going to flop. The heavy metal has kind of blue-green blades, really pretty color, and then beautiful seed heads when they seed out in the late summer and the fall. And that one gets probably like 4 to 5 feet tall. The Shenandoah has beautiful red blades. It only gets 2 to 3 feet tall, and so that makes a nice little grass to mix into like a front yard. The sedges are real important for wildlife. They are seeding out now, and there's tons, there's hundreds of different sedges in Virginia, so those are good to have, but you can find quite a few in the nurseries. The eastern wood sedge is one that's really great. It is evergreen. It can take dry, medium dry to wet. It spreads by rhizomes. If it's not this, is another one that's real similar growing in some of the drainage areas coming off the downspouts in the house. It was already there naturally, so I'm real excited to have that. But being evergreen, it's there all the year, so a great landscape plant, and then it will definitely hold the ground if it's a place that you do have water gushing through. The Pennsylvania sedge can be temperamental, but if it's happy, it will grow under trees where you really can't get a whole lot else to grow, and it can be a lawn substitute. And you can even mow it occasionally, and just to have some coverage. The more we cover air ground, the less weeds we have to pull, and the less you have to mulch. So, and it keeps the grounds cooler too. So that's one thing to consider when you're trying to do native plantings. Now we're going to get into some perennials. If it says part to full shade, that part sun, you would want to have some morning sun, not the hot afternoon sun. But the wild ginger is a great little ground cover. It does die back in the winter, but when it comes up early spring, it's really sweet. It also has tiny little burgundy brown flowers underneath, and the flies actually will hide out in the flowers overnight in the cool spring nights. So, but it's a beautiful ground cover. It will take heavy shade. The wild columbine, one of my favorite flowers. The flowers to me look like the Japanese lantern, and it will attract those early hummingbirds, and it will also take the dry shade under trees. But I've also seen it planted and growing in full sun too, and it seems to do. So it's a bit versatile. Jacob's ladder has beautiful foliage, early like lavender blooms in spring, so great for those early pollinators, and then it'll be covered in seed pods. This is a plant I have on my patio in the porch, and it does very well in a pot. I've had one in pots for a couple of years, and they do really well. So if you don't have great places to plant too many natives, you can consider putting some of them on your porches. The foam flower, beautiful little plant. It is evergreen. It will attract the early bees and hummingbirds and butterflies. You'll find mostly cultivars in most of the nurseries. There are some that are clump forming, and there's some that spread. So depending on where you want it in your landscape, just pay attention to if it's one that runs or not. But it's a beautiful, the leaves are beautiful in this plant. It makes a nice ground cover. The wild bleeding heart, it looks very fragile, but it's actually a really tough plant. I've had it seed out in full sun, but it will bloom in the spring, and then if it has enough moisture, it will bloom periodically through the summer, and then again real heavy in the fall. But it will also take some drier shade also, but it just does need like rich soils. The golden ragwort, I have this planted across the front where we have water that drains. I'm hoping it spreads up into the bed and then out into the drainage area, but I've had some there for maybe 6 weeks and the deer have not touched it, so I'm excited about this plant. It has beautiful evergreen foliage, and then it does bloom kind of early in the spring, beautiful yellow flowers. The Zizia aureae, the golden Alexander, it's in the carrot family. It's a host to the black swallowtail. I know we plant dill and parsley and fennel for the black swallowtail caterpillars, but this is one of the native alternatives to that. But it will take medium moist, full sun all the way to some light shade, and it will tolerate our clay soils. Virginia bluebells and Mayapples are two of our wonderful spring ephemerals. They come up early in the spring before the leaves are on the trees, and then by the time the summer heat gets here, they've kind of faded away. Both of these like really rich humus soil, and they will spread and make colonies. The Mayapple is a host to the Mayapple boar moth, and also the turtles and the Mayapple have a good relationship. The turtles love the fruits that they produce after they flower, and then the turtles are who crawl off and spread the seeds for the plant to reproduce. Goat's beard is a great plant, 4 to 6 feet tall, will attract tons of pollinators. It blooms, I think, late spring. But if you have a woodland garden, this is a nice pop in the back of that garden. The wild geranium is another plant that will do well in the dry shade under trees where you can't get a whole lot to grow. Beautiful lavender, pinky lavender flowers, blooms in the spring, host to 21 different caterpillar species, and then the seeds are loved by the songbirds and the chipmunks. The blue-eyed grass, sun to light shade, moist, well drained, poor to average soil, and evergreen. Before we moved here, we lived in Caroline County, which is in the coastal district, and I felt like I had beach sand in most of the yard, but this would reseed and it would grow. By the end of the summer, it looked a little ragged because of that hot sun and kind of drought, but it's a tough little plant. It is evergreen. It's actually in the iris family. The clump will get bigger and multiply, and you can dig it up and spread it around. But beautiful in little rock gardens or edging, a good alternative to the monkey grass that a lot of people landscape with. The moss phlox, sun to open woodlands, prefers moist, but it can take dry, rocky, sandy soil, and it does form a mat. I had one of these in the yard when we moved there, so I was very hopeful. It bloomed white, so I bought it a pretty little purple friend to go with it, and within like 4 days, the whole thing had been consumed. So it's just that nice, fresh, something new. So when you're trying to plant and with the deer, some things I have encased in deer netting. I used to think I would be opposed to it, but I'm not. And then one garden I have one side is deer netted, but I'm going to encircle the whole thing, because if you want to plant we need to get the plants in there for the wildlife. It's very important. And we have an unusual situation with the deer. I think they're the worst I've ever seen, and I've seen some really bad places. But so you need to really try all you can do to get those plants in there and just be a little diligent with it. So, the wild bergamot, one of my favorites, it attracts more different species of pollinators than any other native plants. It's clump forming. It's not going to be a monarda that spreads out everywhere, so it is very well behaved, and it will take dry, poor soil. On the reverse, the scarlet bee balm, the red, likes kind of medium to wet soil and will full sun to part shade, and that one will tolerate your clay soil. And if you have red monarda, you're going to have hummingbirds. I had a big patch of, it was actually a cultivar raspberry wine, but I used to sit out there with my camera and just watch, and the hummingbirds were like all over it every day. Rutabaga hirta, this is your basic common real black-eyed Susan. In the nurseries you'll find the Goldstrom, and the deer do eat that. The Rutabaga hirta has hairy leaves and stem, and I'm hoping that's a deer deterrent. So I am going to try that one this year. But it's a shorter lived perennial, but it will reseed abundantly. The tall thimbleweed is a very underused plant. You probably don't see it very often. You could probably find it in a native nursery. Sun to heavy shade, shallow rocky soil. It's best on the forest edge, and it blooms these tiny little white flowers on tall stems, and then they turn into seed heads that look like thimbles. And then later in the summer they'll dry out, and as the birds go in there and feed on them, they just kind of go poof like cotton, but they'll hold over through the wintertime to have seeds for the birds. Common milkweed is Asclepias syriaca, though I love that plant. It can be a garden thug. It does spread rampantly. It comes up like everywhere, so it's one you do want to be aware of if you want to have milkweeds. The butterfly weed is a better choice for smaller gardens. Likes dry, well-drained, rocky soil. It does not like wet feet, so if you've got a sunny spot higher up on in the lawn or yard, it's a good place to have it. It is toxic to humans and animals, but it is a host for the monarchs. The swamp milkweed will take moist to wet, so we have a lot of those places if we get rain. 4 to 6 feet tall, it stays in the clump also, and will tolerate our clay soil. The threadleaf coreopsis takes dry, medium rocky soil, heat, humidity, and drought, so it's a good plant for Virginia for sure. The straight species can get 3 feet tall. Mostly in the nurseries you'll see cultivars Zagreb and Moonbeam, and those are a little shorter, but the cultivars usually tend to spread, so just know wherever you put it just to give it some space to spread. But these are long bloomers. They'll bloom like a long time through the summer and into the fall, so they're great ones to have for the pollinators. The obedient plant, funny name because if it's happy, it just does take off, and it's a very aggressive spreader. If it does not get a lot of moisture, it will stay. It'll live, but it'll stay more in one place. But it will take sun to part shade. Beautiful plant, beautiful flowers, and it should be a great hummingbird attractor. And it blooms later in the summer. The mountain mints are great pollinators. Supports over 40 different types of native bees. There are some that are a bit aggressive. These two I have found are not. The Ori mountain mint is drought resistant but prefers moist. I've seen it growing along a lake in a kind of open woodland area, and it was beautiful. It gets 2 to 6 feet tall, and to me it's a stunning plant. And then the Virginia mountain mint, 2 to 3 feet tall, prefers moist to wet. It is drought tolerant because in Virginia especially, typically this time of the year we're a little wetter. By the end of the summer everything's dry, so a lot of the natives are very versatile. They can take the wet, and then they also are tolerant of the dry in the later summer. Virginia mountain mint does not spread out. It stays in a clump. The clump might get bigger, but it would be one good for a garden. In the late summer, fall, the two most important plants to have are the goldenrods and the asters. They have super rich nectar, great for the migrating butterflies. All the bees are trying to get that nectar into their nest for the winter time. So it's good to have all goldenrods and asters. And there's so many different species. There's a plant that would fit any type of landscape. But these are a couple that I picked that are relatively well behaved. The wreath goldenrod, dry to medium, takes poor soil. It can take our clay. It's clump forming and only gets 3 feet tall. The gray goldenrod, full sun, even to light shade, and likes dry, poor, shallow, rocky soil, only gets 2 feet tall. It can take the driest, crappiest, poorest soil you have. But it is, for a small plant, it has a really large seed head, which is great for the pollinators, and all the goldenrod will hold on to the seeds well into the winter time. And then the zigzag, the flowers kind of zigzag up and down the stem. They can take dry forest, but also take floodplains where they tend to flood some, but this one will spread, so if you have an area you just want to cover, this is a great one. Aromatic aster, dry open woods, it will take clay but not wet. It does not like wet feet, so higher up in the yard. 3 feet tall, that's what I like about this one. You can cut it back in the midsummer and it'll stay mat forming. It does spread. To me, it's great in the front of a flower bed. And the New England aster will take medium to rich soil, can get up to 3 to 6 feet tall. You can cut it back in the middle of the summer and it'll stay shorter also. And this one is clump forming. The whitewood aster, part shade to heavy soil, can take dry to medium shallow rocky soil. I've seen it growing in like an upland dry forest. I've also seen it growing along a creek bank, so it's kind of versatile, but only gets 2.5 feet tall, and it does spread and make a nice little patch. All right, so this does conclude my program. I know Lake Monticello, the shrub layer that the wildlife need the most is the layer that we are missing the most, and that would be because of the deer. So, I mean, everybody needs to kind of just dive in and focus on getting some natives in there to help the wildlife. I've seen a few yellow tiger swallowtails. I saw one spice bush butterfly, but I'm used to seeing like tons and tons and tons, so I do really miss the butterflies, and it's just because we don't have any flowers or very, very few native plants. But anyway, this is the Monarda fistulosa. One reason we plant natives is to enjoy that wildlife, but also at the same time just to know that we are providing for all the pollinators. All right, any questions? Monarda fistulosa. It's the wild bergamot. Yes, they are going to post it. Yes?
How do you tell the difference between a male and a female bird if you're going into a nursery?
If it's a smaller native nursery and they've grown them from seed, they probably don't know. So I don't know if some of the larger nurseries might have it identified once it gets to a certain size. So if there's like tissue propagated, you know, if you propagate off a male plant, they're going to be male and female. But if they're seed grown, then you have to wait actually until they get big enough to flower to see. So I'm not sure. Yes, ma'am.
What are the 3 plants that deers don't eat?
So far, the inkberry holly, the golden ragwort, and one that I did not put in here is Amsonia, the blue star flower, but they have not eaten that one yet. But I'm growing 20 some different varieties from seed. Growing them from seed, it's less costly experiments, but I will be planting at some point, and at some point, probably later next year, should have like a list of ones that are least likely to be eaten. So we had up here.
Is there a local nursery you'd recommend? Where do I go to get these plants?
First, if you go on the Virginia Native Plant Society website, there is a list of every nursery that's registered with them in the whole state. And I know there are some small local ones I've seen close. When I started doing natives in 2010, everybody still thought they were weeds. And I think I knew of maybe 2 other in the state, but now there are tons of small growers. The small growers tend to collect their seed locally, and they tend not to use chemicals on them, which is real important also. So.
Okay.
Just to add the Hummingbird Hill.
Yeah.
Sit back down. Hummingbird Hill Native Nursery is in Ivy, Virginia, kind of west of Charlottesville a little bit. You can only go by appointment, go look on their website. Only natives, very dedicated to sort of, getting people to plant more natives. And also, when you come for an appointment, you get like 30 minutes of her time. So she'll talk to you about your space and recommend different plants. Another one is Little Blue Stem. They're out in Waynesboro. I haven't been there, but I've talked to them several times, and they do have several native plants, and that, again, is their main focus. So, two to look for.
All right, I thank y'all very much.